Welcome to another episode of the Stephen Courson Show, everyone. I am excited to have a guy that I've digitally known, been networking with for a little over a year, but this is the first time we've actually talked. Mr. Max Patchman, how you doing, sir?
I'm doing fantastic. Good to finally see you.
I know, yeah, it's been fun. We caught up on LinkedIn. He's a young guy out there living in LA. Buck the 9 to 5 working trend and started his own business. So you guys know me, big fan of that, cheering him on. And it just outside of his fantastic hair, which I'm constantly jealous of, as you know. I was a little, I love following along with a lot of things that he says on LinkedIn. He always gives some great tips on wealth. So I invited him to come on the podcast, and he graciously took some time, and I'm excited. So Max, before we get into it, tell me a little bit about, I want to talk, you are a CFP, you own Poshman. Am I saying it right? Is it Pashman or Poshman?
Pashman.
Because I know you're from Boston, right?
No, I went to school out there, but I'm originally from LA, so it's Pashman.
Oh, okay. So you went to the East Coast from perfect weather to Boston weather. What was that like?
Oh yeah. Well, it's different, right? And that's kind of what I was hoping for at the end of the day, right? I lived in the West Side basically my entire life.
Okay.
I traveled a little bit, but not really much. I was kind of in my own bubble being in LA. So I kind of just wanted to see what it was like to be in a different area. And that's kind of how I prioritized going to school. It was just being somewhere completely different. And I love my friends in LA, but I wanted to see if I can meet new friends and new experiences that I'm not all too familiar with. And I certainly got that. LA and Boston are just complete opposite cities when it comes to the side, the size of the city, the viewpoints, sports, everything is so different around there. And that was kind of what I was hoping for.
People's fear of gluten. I mean, that's massively different right there. So
yeah, I mean, everything, what they do, what they say, everything is just a flip around. But obviously, I came back to the West Side because first of all, I just missed it out there and I got a good dose of what it's like living in the East Coast. And then on top of all that, in my last year of school, it was going great every single year, except we got hit with the worst snowstorm in recorded history. And that really put a nail in the coffin right there for me. So I knew I had to be on the
right Boston. Yeah, no, I'm with you. I'm from Florida, so I'm East Coast, but completely different worlds. And, I like to fly and see snow. And that's about all I need for the year. So I'm sure being from LA, you can agree with that.
I'll stick with snowboarding and that's it.
Same. I love going skiing, love going snowboarding, once, twice a year. That's it. I don't need to see anymore. I'm good.
Yep.
Well, cool, man. Well, listen, tell me a little bit, one of the main things that we like to do on the podcast is on top of the perspectives and the expertise you bring, which we're definitely going to get into with your background being a certified financial planner, you have a lot that you are, you're the kind of person to talk to about these things. You're not a random influencer. You went to school for this stuff. You have the certifications. You put in the work. You're doing the work every day. So I definitely want people to, learn and glean from a lot of the things that that's hard fought wisdom. Hey, this isn't even hard fought wisdom. This is just something that everybody should know. I want to get into all of that for sure. But I want to start off with your background because not everybody grows up at the age of 4 going, Dad, I want to be a CFP when I grow up. Right. So, I like to, and the advice obviously that people give can be very different, even if you hold that title. So I like for people to be able to understand what was it like for you growing up, where, and ultimately, how did that form you into the guy that you are today and what you're doing. So tell me a little bit about what home life was like. Were you guys rich, poor, middle class? You had no idea. And, just give me a little bit of an idea of what the life was like in the Patchman household.
Yeah, for sure. I'll say that, I have been raised in a pretty financially stable household growing up.
That's great.
I'm internally grateful for that, almost privileged in a sense. to be in that kind of background where we had a lot of things stabilized, and it was in my entire life growing up until college was just kind of understanding what it is that I wanted to do. I had
Mm.
no idea.
Okay.
But I had found fascinations in between. I wanted to, I'm still a big car guy right now. Like maybe I want to work on
Ooh,
cars.
okay.
Um,
Did that come from one of your parents? Like, where did the car fascination come from? Just Hot Wheels when you were younger?
yeah, and then that transcended into TV shows and just like picking up magazines and going to auto trade shows. I was so fascinated by it.
Oh,
But then
wow.
I
Okay.
had another interest coming in. I started to get into music a lot more. We're pretty, my
Mm.
brother's a musician, so I kind of got an influence from that. But
Oh,
in
okay. What does
particular,
he play out
I,
of curiosity?
what does he play? I mean, he plays
Yeah,
everything, you know.
everything. Okay.
But
I play a little bit of
for
drums. Guitar is the primary and everything, so I'm a big music fan.
yeah, he does guitar primarily, and then he can do any other instrument after that. But the area that I was into, growing up, I really liked electronic music. So I started DJing. And that's actually
Oh,
what I
that's cool.
did going into college. When I moved out to Boston, it was like I kind of set myself up for a career out there. But for the most part, prior to that, everything was relatively stable going on. I had nothing too much to complain. Um, there was some stuff later down the line that I'll obviously get into in a second, but going into college, I still had no idea what I wanted to do, but I knew somewhere in there I had a fascination with finance and money at some respect. I was
Where
taught a
did where
lot.
did that come like, that doesn't just it's a rarity when that just kinda happens naturally, I feel. Like, was there, did your parents talk about money with
Yeah.
you, fairly often? Did it come like, how did that come about?
I credit a lot of it to my dad. He was still very much to this day, active in the stock market,
Mm,
learning about it, researching, picking stocks out. And then ultimately, he was good with his money in the sense that he knew how to be very frugal. Like a lot of the stability we had in my household was down to his frugality. He was the only
okay.
household or sorry, he was the only person receiving income. My mom left her job as a nurse to take care of us kids, as me and two of my siblings. So
Great,
it was
cool.
primarily my dad bringing in the income for us, and then with that, he was kind of managing our finances. And I learned really how to be frugal because even despite how everything was stabilized, we weren't very um what's the word, like flashy or anything like that. We
Mm,
had very cheap cars. Like I had, Toyota, Tacoma. I really loved that car and everything. But my dad, he got, a Toyota electric vehicle for himself.
okay.
One of the first guys to do that in like 2001, as it turned out, in LA. But he didn't really
Wow,
care
yeah.
much
I mean,
about
we're
that
talking like
stuff.
some of the
So
first electric vehicles at that point.
yeah, yeah, but even still, we fared very well. And I kind of learned a lot from that in terms of best practices and learning a lot about, just like what is an investment. And at that point, I had pursued an economics degree because I felt like it was something that I was particularly fascinated with. To me, economics is kind of like it's almost like a science versus a business because
Totally
it's
agree
the
with that.
philosophy of business almost rather than understanding how business is like how do all of the businesses work. So that's basically the culmination of what economics is, right?
Did did
So
you ever did you ever read the book Freakonomics? Or have you
oh
ever
yeah,
listened in
I'm
podcasts?
obsessed with economics. I love
Yeah,
it.
I love Freakonomics. So, like, I'm with you. For me, it's like so I actually went back and got my accounting degree as a second degree online, which is crazy because I'm not like a huge college guy or anything like that or big in academia. But I knew I wanted to be an entrepreneur someday and I had to have a better understanding of how business worked. And I remember picking up Freakonomics at that point and being like, this is fascinating because what you really learned is that what economics is ultimately about is human behavior
Yeah,
at a like grand scale when you really get down to it. I mean, things like the law of diminishing returns, I think about all the time. So, it's a fascinating bent how economics can seem so unsexy and boring, and then you talk to somebody who really knows it well, and it's like, oh wow, that's actually pretty cool.
yeah, and I found a lot of that too while being in college. just
Okay.
learning about all this. You know, that's what college is kind of discovering yourself and what it is that you want to do.
Right.
So,
Not
you know,
racking up
while
120 grand in debt, hopefully, if you can accomplish that.
yeah, absolutely. And throughout that time, I basically made a career out of DJing. I was a resident in Boston at one point. It was like every Thursday I'd be
Did
at a
you start
bar.
DJing in college, or had you ever done it before, like in high school or anything prior to that?
I did, but never live. This is like the first time I'd
Oh,
actually done
okay.
events and and on top of that, getting paid to do it, which is awesome. You know, you get entry into these places,
Okay.
you get to party with people that are significantly older than you. Like, you know, I just like hit 21 at the time, so it's just like this is awesome.
Yeah.
So it was pretty cool to do that, and I kind of got a sense that was like my first real experience running some kind of business for myself, right? Like
What
I'm
was your
doing
DJ?
was Max Chase. Chase is my middle name, so just like make it very simple. Don't
Okay.
overcomplicate it, and whatnot. So that's what it was.
So you
Um,
weren't just like going around to like clubs and like, yo, let me play some stuff, crazy hairdo or whatever, just doing it for the fun of it. You were like legitimately trying to, hey, I'm going to make some money, pay off some stuff. Like you turned it into an actual business. It wasn't
Yeah,
just
I
fun.
I did. It was, I had to network. I had to learn how to market myself even on social media at the time, how it was bringing a certain amount of people because, the thing that people don't understand about like the DJ business in general is that in the beginning it's not about how good you are at DJing, it's about how many people do you bring as a DJ. They're like how good
Ah,
you are as a DJ, it's
okay.
already standard, right? Like you have to be good. There's no way around it. It's when you come on, like, how many tickets do you sell? How many people are you bringing? So basically, to boil it down, I learned a lot in terms of business from there, right?
Um,
But I also learned at that point that it wasn't a business that I particularly wanted to sort of scale. I found a
mm,
lot of anxiety at some point doing it. So now I treated it like a hobby, really. It got to that point, especially after college. I had moved back to LA and I wanted to kind of move forward with just focusing on the finance side of things.
okay.
Um, so that's kind of how it all transitioned. But it's been a whirlwind, and I'm really grateful for how I grew up in terms of what brought me to where I am right now, and being able to have the opportunities that I have today.
What's one of the most important lessons that you remember that your dad kind of instilled in you from an early age that you're like, that really stuck with me?
Yeah, I think it was just like one of the lessons is just like it's not a matter of your wealth is not defined by your appearance. It's what you do behind the scenes. And that's
Mm,
kind of what I learned. And
that's great.
that isn't something that he told me. That's something I've basically observed.
Okay.
It's something that I've noticed because it's like, growing up, you're a kid. It's like, you have money. Why aren't you spending it? Type of thing,
Right.
right? Like a lot of kids think, like a lot of teenagers think. And, you start to understand that it's not really what you do on the outside that it defines your wealth. It's really how you're building it behind the scenes, almost as we like to coin it, stealth wealth in that
Yes.
sense.
Yeah, oh, yeah. I love that term because the reality is, one thing we talk about with a lot, that I talk about with a lot of people, it's like your net worth is not your self worth,
Mhm.
and that can easily be misconstrued because isn't that what we do with other people? We get online and we're looking and got the social media right here in front of us, and we're going, oh man, that person's on another vacation. Oh, they've got the car, oh, they've got this, I mean, you live out in LA, and LA is pretty notorious for, maybe not everything being real,
Yeah.
but the reality is that that's everywhere. It's not specific to LA. You go anywhere, somebody's faking stuff online, or they're not faking it, but they're just showing you the few moments that are awesome in their life and not the rest. Right.
Yeah. And that was really kind of one of many things that made me want to point to going into finances. There was
Mm,
a lot of things happen. When I moved back to LA, I started to see like kind of the reality of finances.
yeah.
California just being one of the most expensive places around.
Yeah.
Barely any of my friends like own homes in California because it's ridiculously expensive.
Oh,
just
yeah.
to go out or anywhere like that. And then on top of all that, my parents unfortunately had filed for a divorce, so
Mm,
it created a little, financial instability, especially doing it later down in life when
yeah.
you're supposed to be kind of retired and everything like that. Obviously, they're doing fine, but there have been hiccups, right? Like splitting assets is never a fun
Oh,
process, and going through attorneys and all of that stuff. And then on top of that, really noticing that a lot of people were really, spending a lot. My generation was plagued with kind of this idea that you gotta go on these vacations, you gotta tell the world, you gotta
mm,
basically spend all this money to post something on Instagram and get a couple hundred likes without really prioritizing what is it that you need to do. And I think that was primarily what steered me closer to finance, because I was like, listen, I grew up in a financially stable household. I learned a lot from, my parents being knowledgeable in this area. This is something that I want to make sure every financial household has.
okay.
And that was kind of what inspired me to go in this direction, because I felt like I could make a real impact going
Mm,
down this route with the knowledge that I have, with the experiences that I have, understanding what it actually takes to be in that position, and then seeing and being a beneficiary of it too almost inspires me to want to make sure that the upcoming generations can have something stable like that too, because I think everyone deserves that. Obviously that's not the way the world works.
I
So
totally agree. Let,
yeah.
let me ask you a little bit of a question. It's going to come a little bit from left field, but I'll tie it into it. Because I think this says a lot about who you are as a person, and what I'm picking up from that. How many, when you think of close friends, and you can include your brother in this as well, because they can be your sibling, doesn't mean they're your friend, right?
Yeah.
I've got a lot of siblings. I love them all, and everything. So, but I know plenty of people that don't feel that way. Uh, but when it comes to close friends, and I guess I would define that as people that you're talking to at least 2 times a week, whether that's phone or some extensive text conversations or just getting together or whatever. How many close friends would you say you have?
Oh, that's a tough question, because the interesting thing is that I
I
had
won't make you
become,
name names and piss anybody off. So,
well, of course, right? I don't want anyone listening to this to suddenly block me or defriend me. But
the old MySpace days of getting taken, out of the top nine, it was hell. So,
I will say that the circle has definitely gotten smaller for sure. And
yeah.
I think that I've realized that recently. Come my 30th, my 30th was in May. And you start to, I feel like around that time I started to understand who was my real friend and who was not my, or maybe they were my friend but not my close friend.
Okay.
Someone that, be willing to check up on you, or even me doing the same. It works both ways, right? It's like
Absolutely.
it's
Oh
it's
yeah.
not even a matter of like who is reaching out to me, it's who am I reaching out to, because that
No, I love
responsibility,
you said that. I love you said that.
it,
Mhm.
it, it, it lies on me too. I have responsibility. And I think a lot of people fail to recognize that, is like, you can't just expect the world to, ping in on you. You have to be in that same boat as well. So I've certainly realized my circle has gotten smaller, but it's also brought me closer to people at the same
Mm,
time,
good.
especially going out on my own. Because the past year starting my own business has been brutal. I'm doing it on my own. Starting your own financial planning firm in an incredibly competitive industry, starting from scratch. I mean,
Mhm.
it's like, people don't really do those types of things, especially in the financial industry. They'll just go to another.
Especially at, what were you, 29 when you started that?
Yeah, I was 29 when I
I
started
mean, people start lots of companies, in their 20s, different types of it.
that. Mhm.
Finance isn't one where you tend to see that. More you see people taking a lot more of that safer route in their 20s, maybe later on in their 30s with more experience under their belt or whatever. They're starting up their own firm or something. So, I mean, you definitely fit a little outside that trends, and like
Yeah.
all the more power to you, in my opinion.
Yeah.
So, the reason I asked the question about the friend thing is because I talk about I have an acronym called FORTO, which just stands for the four types of wealth. And the four types of wealth are time, financial, social, and health.
Mm.
And one thing that I see, and they are all very much interlinked, right? So as I hear you talking about this, there's this saying that you spend your 20s making friends and you spend your 30s losing them. And you come off as a person who is very genuine, someone who is very much focused on, the real, I guess you could say. And that was just kind of the vibe I was getting a little bit as you were saying some of those things earlier on. Some of the influence with your parents, and the stealth wealth. I mean, like, the fact that you kind of saw that early on, you know it's sad to say it, but with the pandemic, especially right now, there's a lot of people out there that have a lot of friends, but they don't have any good friends.
Hmm.
And that is something that, I love. I like to ask that question because I think people during the pandemic really kind of start to saw that. I lost friends. I had people that we don't talk anymore. And to your point, I don't reach out to them either because I kind of realized, there actually wasn't that much to that. I thought there was more, but there wasn't on either side. And I don't feel, any animosity towards them, but it does kind of make you wake up and realize that. So I was curious about, when you said that about the social circle. I think that's a very underrated element to it. How much would you say the people that are close to you right now, as you've come back, you started off your career, and now you're, really doing your own, having that kind of foundation of like a small circle, have you found that to be, a boon to what it is you're trying to do?
It's interesting. I mean, the thing about it is like the route I have been taking has been very in lone wolf territory, in
Mm,
the sense that like a lot of it has been on my own. And I don't, you know, where my friends come have been coming into play has been just, you know, trying to take the tension off, or trying to take my mind off of things, or just really just having someone to talk to, or as we like to call it, our support system.
a lot of value in that.
And just, having someone to bounce off of, to try to detach myself, right? But in terms of what I have been building here is all my own right now.
Mm,
I everything I've been pulling together as far as resources, the networking, prospects, clients, you name it, it's been on my own. And my close friends have been very good cheerleaders in that sense. They've been curious about what has been going on,
it's fantastic.
making sure that I'm okay. And honestly, those are the only types of people that I really want in my life at this point. I'm
Right.
done with the trying to impress others for the sake of what it is. I put on a humble state, more than anything else, just really seeing what it is eye for eye. And I think it's just like a realization that's been coming in just a couple, not a couple months, but a year being in this business. It's been it's opened a lot of doors for me, and it's certainly closed a lot of them as well. But at the end of the day, it's just like you have to understand, the path that you're on, what you're willing to do to get to the next step, and it's going to come with those kind of sacrifices. So I tell it to people all the time. Just you have to focus on yourself, and everything will compound on that more than anything else, because you're going to gravitate the people that are aligned with you with what it is that you're doing, and those are the people that you want in your life.
Oh yeah, definitely. There's a lot of truth to that. The saying that you are the sum of the five people that you're closest to, right?
Yep.
And I think that, especially once you kind of hit your 30s, you really start to see that separation. Because if you see, people, and, if there's like one person in a group of four that starts really doing a lot better than their other friends, or they have higher aspirations or goals than maybe they do, I think that's when they kind of start to see the disconnect. And, not that there's not value in friends that aren't going to help you build your business or give advice. You can find that elsewhere. But
Yep.
sometimes it's like those aspirations aren't there. A lot of people can feel held back by that. So
Mhm.
it's fascinating that you said that. So as you've grown, so here you are, you're starting your own business in the middle of a pandemic, by the way, and God knows California's experience has not been other places' experience in the country. So it wasn't just like, Florida, we're probably the polar opposites to you guys. and
Yep.
the pandemic ended for us a long time ago, depending on how you look at it. But you guys have been shut down for a lot longer than the rest of the country, slower to open. You decided in the middle of all of that, when you've got a career, relatively stable paycheck, to say, I'm going to go and do one of the hardest things you can do in business, which is start my own at a time to where we just had a recession, 2020. We're in a recession right now, whether or not they want to acknowledge it or not.
Mhm.
So economic times, whether we are or aren't in a recession, it doesn't matter. People know how expensive their food and their gas are. Everybody's pinching dollars and cents and different things like that. Are you crazy? Like, what was does insanity, come with it? Because you have to be a little bit to say, hey, I'm going to go start my own business. I'm going to take this chance. How did you come to that, in order to say, and look, I did the same thing. So I get it. I'm right there with you. But, tell me a little bit about, for all the people who are changing jobs right now that are considering either a side hustle or full out entrepreneurship, like, what was your mentality of, now's the time to make the jump? How did you
Yeah.
come?
For me, there was a lot of things boiling up to the point where I pulled the trigger on it.
Okay.
And, when I did at the time, virtually everyone in the financial industry thought I was crazy. I mean, like everyone thought I was nuts.
Yep.
Trying to explain to them what I was doing, putting together, they're like, I would never do this. It's too expensive. It's, this and that. And leading up to that decision was a lot of things for me. For one thing, I was in the broker dealer industry for basically the entirety of my financial planning career. And I don't really have anything against the broker dealer industry, but it's not one that I'm aligned with
Okay.
in terms of their approach, how they do financial planning, everything along those lines, where we see things differently in that
Okay.
respect. So that was number one. But then the other thing was really the people I was sitting across from at the time. It was just amazing how much I was unable to serve people with what they wanted to do. With all
Mm,
of the content that I've been putting on, LinkedIn was a huge part of it for me,
mm,
making sure that I was building a presence, because I started that in 2019 while I
okay.
was at my previous job. And I'd basically been building a presence for 2 years before I had made that jump for myself.
What
And then
what was your follower count by the time you made the jump? Do you remember?
oh,
Ballpark?
what do you mean? Oh, my
On
follower account before I
Yeah,
made
yeah,
the
on
jump?
LinkedIn or any other. I don't know if I'm with you on LinkedIn. I'm not with you on any other social, so I don't know if you have a large following elsewhere.
Yeah, I mean, I on LinkedIn at that point, when I made the jump, I had like 20,000 followers.
Okay.
I
So not a
only
million. You're not this
no,
massive linked influencer with 500,000 or anything. Okay.
nor do I need to be. I'm always a big person that says it's not about your follower count; it's about your engagement count more than
Exactly. I
anything
think that's
else.
a
Um,
super not underestimated, underrated thing, is the fact that you did this, and this is what I want people to take note of. 20,000 followers. You
mhm.
weren't at 500,000. Like, you can do this without that. So that's a great lesson. Sorry, continue.
Yeah, for sure. And the thing about it was like I was in front of a lot of people that, you know, they were in relatively good financial positions, but they just wanted guidance more than anything. And not just like guidance in general, but like just guidance on how to build wealth. Just like a lot of these people just they didn't have anything on the side. Like they're great at what they do. But they just don't know where to start. Right now, I'm specifically focused on sales professionals, and that's kind
Okay.
of the target that I've been on, because one, those the people that reached out to me on LinkedIn were primarily sales professionals, but also I would often find times where people would have these massive commission checks, and then they don't even know what to do with it after. They just like they dump it in their savings account, then they go on vacation, then they spend it, and they don't really have any money management done on the back end in terms of automation or really a plan in general. And where I was before was not entirely serviceable for those. It was more in the service of, selling a product or acquiring assets in some respect, which is totally fine if that's how you want to do financial planning, but that's not how I
Right.
want to do it. I want to be focused on the financial planning and be compensated on the financial planning.
Okay.
And when I was looking at that as far as my options go, I felt like my approach was different than the entire industry. It just felt like there was something very disconnected. Um, People wanted to see me because and I'm not like just saying that to stroke my ego, but when people were reaching out, it was because of the personal brand. I was putting Max Pashman on there. So when they
It
wanted a meeting,
people are more likely to talk about their sex life or political beliefs than they are their money. So it makes
sure.
complete sense that they're going to want trust, at minimum, the fact that they like you, to be established before they would give you, access to their money, right?
Yeah, exactly. And the thing that a lot of people what I've come to realize is that the company that I made Passionate Financial, people just do not even care about that. They don't care
Mm,
about how the logo looks. They don't care about what the name is. They just want to talk to me.
mm,
Right. So I wanted to position myself where it was like, you want financial planning, you want to talk to me, that's what you're going to get. So I made the decision to go start my own firm. And like I said at the time, I kind of got the sense from a lot of people that it was too risky, it wasn't the right decision. I wish you all the best of luck, that
that
that whole
mm,
thing,
yeah.
you're doing something like, as a, people would say, like, as a friend, you should do like more research, blah, blah, blah. I've been told all these things. Yeah, I've heard it all from people. And I decided to do it because I just knew this was the right path for me. And
Mm,
this is how I visualized financial planning being done. And
okay.
when we flash forward to the time I made my announcement, I think that's what we were just talking about earlier. It was the first time in 2 years publishing content I had ever asked anyone for a meeting. First time I went public with it, saying like,
Really?
"Hey, if you want to book a financial planning consultation with me, here's the link below." I had never done that up until that point, and that shows you, maybe to people listening, like I'm not really asking. I haven't asked people anything for those last 2 years.
Mm,
I'm just giving people a lot of content, a lot of
yes.
insight. That's all my content has been. Is just give, 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 give. That's what it is constantly. Give this information, help people learn, get some value add without feeling like they're getting, pitched in every single post. But that was the first time I did it. And I
Okay.
was able to set 10 meetings as a result of that. So I was
10
already off
meetings.
the yeah, I was
First
already first one, I was already off to the races. And I had known at that point, like, that's more than I ever did working at previous firms. And then after that, it started to compound, more meetings, more referrals. Barely got that in the past. Now I get them pretty frequently now from people in my network, my clients, friends, whoever it is. Now it's working because there's a lot of faith in what I do because of what I've been giving. And a
Mm.
lot of people share the vision that I have now. So happy to look back at this and say that was the best decision I ever made in my career.
So you make this journey, like you said, you're very much on your own, so I can relate to you going off starting this. I'm one of those salespeople, right? That probably needs somebody like you in my life. I remember, I've been doing corporate sales for the past 13, 14 years. And we used to always joke about how the first week we just called it new car week. You would have liked it actually. But we just called it new car week. It was January 1st to January 7th. Most salespeople would take that week off or whatever, as the end of the fiscal year, they're done. And then, or I'm sorry, it wasn't that. It was January um, 8th, basically. That second week of January, we called it new car week because everybody would be gone on vacation or they'd be done,
Yep.
working butt off to the end of the year. Nobody's around. And then when they come back the second week of January, everybody's got a new car. You look out into
Mhm.
the parking lot. There's all the newest models and everything. Like it was crazy. So to your point, when you're looking at that, and you're these people who have that. And oh my gosh, I just realized I totally lost where I was going with this question. I'm sorry. I'm going to be honest. I got off on new car week and telling you about it, and I'm going to have to pivot because there's a question at the end of it for you. Now I forgot.
Good to know.
So it's like that old Peter The Office thing. He's like, hey, sometimes I start a sentence and I don't even know where it's going, and I just keep talking and hope I find my way back to it. So,
yep.
Thanks, Michael Scott. Appreciate
Classic.
it. Yeah, classic. But circling back to where I think I was going. One of the things that got me thinking was you started this. Like you said, everybody's like, what are you doing, Max? This isn't a great idea. They're looking out for you, or they feel they are. But the reality is, that's not maybe what you need. So what did you do? Did you read books? Was there somebody you were following online? Where were you getting any kind of advice or direction on how to navigate through starting this business and doing something that you've never done before?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I did a lot of extensive research behind the scenes during my time at my previous firm.
Okay.
And the good thing about the financial industry these days is like what I am doing is actually kind of a new thing in terms of like starting off on your own, starting your own RIA, because that wasn't a common thing back then. But as it turns out, if you want to go in the fee only direction, you can go independent with the right resources in front of you. And one of those resources was a network called XY Planning. Advisors listening to this probably are aware of it, but basically it's a membership where they give you access to how to set up your own RIA. They give you resources, training, education, and then they give you access to services that you would typically need to set up your business, whether it's your CRM, your compliance, your step-by-step process to booking people, what you're doing documenting wise, all the stuff that you would need on the back end. And they would provide a lot of these resources to you. So I had a lot of guidance from that. But, having to try to explain that to, old leadership and everything, they're just like, what is this? What are you doing? This isn't like this isn't like what we normally do. I'm like, yeah, because a lot of people are still stuck in the dinosaur ages, quite frankly. And this is kind of a new wave of advisors coming out. And then on top of that, I had a lot of help. I had a lot of mentors along the way on LinkedIn that were following me, people that were just, willing to help out in that respect. And setting up the RIA in general, it's a tedious process to do. It's still very tedious right now, especially on the compliance and regulatory end, having to do all the administrative work on the back end.
It's a big deal. Highly regulated. You're going to get dinged on that. Yeah.
Time. It's all these different things that I have to do, but it feels really good to have things on my own terms more than anything else. I still have a lot of improving to do, but I'm happy with the impact that the company is making to a lot of my clients, because it just feels like I'm really bringing my vision to life here in terms of what people are actually looking for when they are sitting down in front of an advisor. Because I feel like what a lot of financial advisors traditionally aren't doing is they aren't asking people like, what are your expectations working with a financial advisor? Or
absolutely.
What's the value add that you are looking for partnering with people? Because without it, they're kind of placing that trust into you, thinking that that's what you're going to deliver to them. So that's a question I always throw to people is, what's the kind of relationship you're actually expecting from this? Because as it turns out in the financial industry, there's a lot of ways to approach it. So my job is to make sure that people are given the proper guidance based on what it is that they're looking for. And it feels good to do that because of the flexibility I have now.
No, I think that's really important. And one of the things that you said, at the beginning of all that was that you're a fee only guy, right?
Yeah.
Which is I don't know enough to know if that's a newer trend, but I feel like that's coming out a lot more as people are starting to realize, like, if the in you can be a
Yeah.
percentage based,
Oh,
CFP or
yeah.
anything like that. That's fine, but it can, impact, performance of portfolios over the long term pretty
Yeah.
significantly.
To
So talk to
clarify,
me a little bit about that, because I don't think a lot of people understand the difference of how you actually pay a CFP or any other, professional who's handling your money. What's kind of the dichotomy there?
yeah, and I think this is a topic people should be more aware of.
Mhm.
For the sake of transparency, and that's really what my company is being as transparent as possible. Just making sure everyone is aware of what's going on, and there's nothing hidden, and there's no hidden agenda behind it. So to give kind of a breakdown of what that is, so there's basically two models that a lot of things can be broken down to. There's fee based and fee only. Fee only means that you are only compensated from the client and not from anyone else, not from a third party when you are dealing with the client. So, I'm not contracted with anyone under me. You can be contracted with a company, but they can't really pay you. The client
Okay.
has to pay you. They have to pay strictly for the financial planning service. Fee
Mm,
based can do that, but they are also compensated like a they're paid from the third party too, like a commission, for example. And that's really the differentiator right there is, are they paying you a commission or not? And
and why is that a big deal? Like, who cares if I'm coming to you and you're investing my money and you're fee based, why would I care if a third party is, giving you any kind of kickback?
because the commission may incentivize you to recommend those commission products more than anything else. And
Right.
that's what we have seen is, where we're trying to get to the point where we can remove or at least minimize conflicts of interest as much as possible, because you look really hard, there's a conflict potentially somewhere, but it's about minimizing it as much as possible, and that's something that we are capable of doing. And unfortunately, in my experience working with other people, when you implement a commission structure, conflicts arise. There's no way around
Absolutely.
it. There may be exceptions to it. I certainly have seen it, but as long as that is there in the system, the conflicts are going to be there. So if you end up working with a fee base, you may be vulnerable to being pitched something that is not in your best interest. And the reason why they're doing it is to maximize their commission check, right?
Yeah, it's a
So,
sales thing. I mean, this happens all the time. It's one of those things to where, to put it in this industry terms, if I'm handling somebody's money, and this isn't to say that people aren't, that they're purposefully just trying to get a paycheck and they're not trying to take care of your stuff. That's not true, because, they are trying to make sure that you get a good return, because, if you don't, then you're going to leave them anyway. But
yeah,
difference is if they know your goals is to stay like under a certain level of risk, for instance. But there's this one that's maybe a little bit past that. I could invest your money in and I'll get an extra percentage point, which could be a couple $1,000s for me if I put it in that. Well, like you said, it creates that conflict of interest between potentially of what the client wants versus me getting a paycheck.
yeah.
And it can get a little gray there.
Yeah, and the thing about it is, like, something that I very much want to clarify is that when everything I'm doing is sales in general, so it's not a sales problem, or anything like that, but it's more of how companies are set up is the type of problem. Because the thing that I've been telling a lot of people is that financial advisors should not be sales professionals, they should be business owners.
Ooh,
And
I
there's
like
a
that.
very big difference between those two, because you only answer to yourself as a
Yes.
business owner. And
Great distinction there. Please, everybody listening to that, hear that. The difference is to think like a business owner versus thinking like a salesperson, and it comes down to responsibility. A salesperson, when I was in sales, I didn't feel responsibility for whether or not the product was working or anything like that. I mean, I was selling it because I truly believed it, but I wasn't ultimately responsible for it. The business owner, responsible for all of that and the
yeah,
entire experience the client has. So I
and
love that distinction you made, man. That's a great point.
And just to add something on top of that, that is not to bash salespeople whatsoever. Like I work with salespeople, right?
Right.
But the thing is that I think the financial profession in general has to be detached from that because
Mm,
it's not like we're selling products or anything like that. We are servicing people's money, so we have to be mindful of those decisions more than anything because our job has to be maximizing their money potential. So as long as you're being transparent with how you are being compensated is how they're going to better understand you and then how you can make better judgment by removing those things. Sales professionals, if they get a commission or they're on a quota, that's fine. It's an incentive, right? But I think that in the financial world, I don't think those incentives should be in there because a lot of money, is being handled well or mishandled by the practices done behind the scenes. And my goal, being a fee only owner, is not only to show that transparency in terms of what it is you're paying me, how I get compensated, and how that could potentially influence the decisions I present to you, but also it's just that's how it should be.
mm.
That's not, it shouldn't be like this innovative thing like it is right now because the sad truth is like that's not how it's always been. It's always been like, like you have to push a product, you have to hit a quota. It's like people should
Yeah.
just pay you for financial services. So to me, the direction I'm going on seems pretty reasonable, even if it is untraditional. It seems like it's the right decision. And I've seen a lot of people make the go down this route. They're doing fantastic things, and we're slowly influencing people one at a time. So I think that it's really it's really awesome to be on this side of the financial industry history with regards to like what kind of business I'm building and being really confident about it and then giving my clients a sense of security behind it too.
I love it. I mean, you saw something, you personally disagree with it, you went out and you're doing something about it. That is more than what the majority of people can say right now. A lot of people stop at just the complaining about it, right?
Yeah.
And so, a lot of respect for you and what you're doing there. With a couple minutes left, I want to transition. I want to ask two things quickly. One, I saw you have a certificate in blockchain and digital assets. So I have been an investor in blockchain and crypto since 2017. I came up on the tech side, so I found it a little bit earlier than some others. Tell me a little bit about what that certificate is about, because I don't think that's something. I think it's going to become more common, but I don't think that's something that's very pervasive in the financial industry right now. If anything, people try to stay away from it. Obviously, BlackRock, coming in and making a agreement with Coinbase opens up a whole new world of stuff there. But what kind of led you to do that, and what's that about?
Yeah, well, a lot of it was getting it came with CFP credits, to be
Okay.
clear. Because when having a CFP designation, you have education requirements,
Hmm.
and you have to participate in new courses and education to keep up with it. And they
That's good to know
offer
they have that. Okay.
CFP, and I'm still building on that certificate, by the way. So I'm still like learning, even on the back end, doing more courses to get the full certificate as it is. But what it is it allows, the association behind it is really trying to bring financial planning closer to crypto, blockchain, DeFi, Web3. They're bringing us closer to it, and as they
Okay.
should be, because we should be the first ones to report what that is instead of going onto Twitter
Totally.
on a thread, or on a Discord chat to learn about
Right.
all of this stuff, right?
User
So
90321 may not be the most reputable source for your crypto information.
yeah,
So
so we want to make sure that we're prepared with the questions that come up because the upcoming generations, especially with Gen Z, is very much getting involved with it, and they will be getting more involved into Web3. So the thing that I always tell financial advisors is that if there's an opportunity for you to really differentiate yourself, you got to do it. And
I
there's
totally agree.
far too few people that are willing to learn about it, especially in the older crowd. A lot of them just are just like, don't do it, just go with what's traditionally been done. And I kind of respect that to some sense, but at some point it's going to get normalized. It's getting closer to being, accepted mainstream. We saw that over the last couple of years. We're seeing about a potential partnership between BlackRock and Coinbase right now. Like the needle is moving. The
BlackRock
needle is
does,
moving forward.
I think I saw it was 4% of the world's wealth under one company. I mean, these guys run things.
Well,
So if they're getting into it, it's a big
they're the
move.
largest asset manager in the world.
Right.
They hold so much of it, and the fact that they want to get themselves involved just tells us how much the financial institutions are getting closer to it and making it part of a portfolio. Like that's
Mhm.
what is being told through the courses by the institution that issues that certificate is, what's the reasonable amount of Bitcoin that should be inside of a
Yes.
portfolio?
Yeah.
Like what should we know inside of it? So it's bringing us a lot closer to it, and I almost felt like I had to do it more than anything. It's like I had to be very much involved in it. And what a better way to like show that I actually know what I'm talking about by showing like, hey, I've taken a lot of these courses. I can speak in your language too, on top of everything, making it feel like, we're on the same page. So I think any opportunity that we can warn about anything innovative or new opportunities for our clients, we wouldn't be, doing them real service if we weren't kept up to date with it too.
I totally agree. I don't see even 2 years from now that you can be in finances and not have some type of blockchain cryptocurrency, avenue to be able to invest. I mean, because when you think about it, 2 years ago, even the JP Morgans of the world, all those big firms, they were demonizing it. They were talking about all the fallacies of it. And now what are they doing? You got JP Morgan, they're trying to set up their own crypto. Like they're, let alone invest in all these others. They're fighting to get the Bitcoin ETF up, on the exchange. I mean, it's here to stay. Now, whether or not Dogecoin is going to be the currency of the future or not, or, Fartcoin makes it or any of these, that's completely different topic. But for right now, we know that something is going to be, a big part of this moving forward. So, as we wrap up, my question to you would be, wide open field. You give one piece of advice to investors right now, blanketed statement kind of a thing. What advice would you want the masses to hear?
The best thing that I could give to people, especially in this environment that we're seeing right now, is that it's important to understand your why more than how much money you need. Because the thing about it is like when you make a ton of money, and this isn't from my words, this is from what I've heard from a lot of other people, is that when you make a ton of money, you realize that it wasn't really about the money, as it turns out.
Right.
And we're on this route of financial independence and wanting to be on our own financially and being a good position, right? So the important thing to understand that every investor should understand is why are you investing? Like
Mhm.
don't focus on what you were investing, but why are you doing this in general?
Yes.
Because why is that important? Because it's going to help you make consistent contributions. When the headlines are up, you're still going to continue on your path because you won't cope down to short-term fear. You know your why and you know how important it is to stick to the long run. And then on top of everything, it makes everything more efficient from a money management standpoint. Like why am I investing for the short term or intermediate or the long term? Why am I paying down my debt? Why am I setting up the life insurance or anything like that? If you don't understand your why, you won't have the right guidance and you'll just be investing blindly. And that can turn out to be something that becomes like like a arrow in the Achilles almost
Yeah.
is
Mhm.
because you don't know what it is. And then when the going gets rough, you shoot yourself. So it's important to understand that why. And I think just having a concrete financial plan that you can stick with, that you can monitor over time, and that you can consistently adjust is going to be the backbone of it.
Yes. Absolutely. Well, Max, that was fantastic, man. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. I mean, just the last little bit. Speaking of me, feeling it right here. The why we talk about this all the time, me and my wife, just a brief example, we recently built this house that we're in, and, this wasn't even a thought that we would be living in this really nice house or anything 5 years ago. Our why 5 years ago was she had $265,000 in student loans because she had gone to a very nice, I don't know if you know Azusa Pacific. It's in your neighborhood, actually.
Yeah, I do.
Yeah, Azusa Pacific. So she went out there from Wisconsin, moved there, was pre-med, went off to Baylor. So a lot of money in student loans. We met $265,000 in debt. I didn't have any other than the mortgage. And that was more than the mortgage I had at the time. And then, our why when we decided to get married was, hey, we want to have the freedom for, as we build a family, to not be bound by this debt. And we want to have the option to be able to do whatever we want to do at that point. And we don't know what that is, but we just know that by the time we're having kids in 5 years, we don't want that to hold us back. And then if we hadn't have done that, and there were rough days and rough months and times I didn't want to throw a huge commission check down on the debt, but we remembered that. And then what happened was, instead of paying it off in 5 years, we paid it off in 4. And then we've had amazing opportunities from investment perspective, from traveling and all these other things. Never would have been able to do it if we hadn't been focused on the why. And, so I don't think enough people take advantage of that small, simple truth. So thank you so much for that. This was an absolute pleasure for me, and for everyone listening, thank you for doing that. Hopefully you're able to take some of what Max said, apply it to your own life. And sir, look forward to talking to you again.
Yeah, I appreciate you having me on, man.
No problem, dude. Good talking, and we'll be in touch.
Sounds good.